It's interesting how politics can play a part in our lives, and sometimes it can even play a part that you're not expecting it to play in all along those roles. I was actually going to one of my favorite restaurants on yesterday and ran into a young couple. I'm thinking that they're probably in their young or early 20s or something along those lines, because I was actually thinking that they were out celebrating graduation. So I asked the young couple that, and all in that particular number and all in that space. And as it turned out, they were actually taking pictures at a very lovely area here in Durham that we call Duke Gardens. And they were actually taking their wedding pictures because they were going to get married in May of 2025. The reason I said that it might be interesting in the whole political angle and all in that space is that the young lady was from Romania. Her future husband is from this part of the United States, and I think that they want to get married in Romania. So I'm under the impression, and that's what I was telling some of the coworkers at this particular restaurant that I go eat at, which is a Mediterranean style restaurant, that I'm thinking that she's hoping that things will calm down in Romania, since Romania is just to the south of the border of Ukraine. And that's maybe why she's setting the wedding for May, because she's hoping that things will be calmed down by that particular time and that she can have a safe wedding and not have to worry about bullets whizzing by, or the possibility of Russia deciding to invade her country instead of invading Ukraine, and all in that space. So I'm going to bring Kim Calhoun, who's one of the founders of the network. And of course, we might get into this discussion as well as discussions around what's going on in the whole world with the Trump trial and a number of other things as well. And we've also got Adam Lambarella and Rick Rosner and all in that space. But what do you think about my theory? Because like I said, the young lady was a very attractive Romanian lady and all along those lines. And I told her and her fiance that they made for a very cute couple and all in that space. But like I said, when I asked them the wedding date, they were like, well, we're going to get married in May. So I'm thinking that she wants to be safe since she wants to get married in her home country and all along those lines. But that's just my theory. Unfortunately, I did not get their names. Otherwise, I would give a proper shout out and give them their names and everything. But I did find out where she was from and all along those lines. But they were a very cute couple and all in that space. But I'm thinking that she wanted to wait till May. And May, we're talking, this is now May of this year. So we're talking about a year from now. Hopefully things will calm down and she can have a nice, safe wedding and all in that space. But what's your thoughts?
Well, my thoughts are you have no idea what wedding planning is, because it usually takes about a year to secure a church or a facility, if not longer, depending on what your venue is going to be. Go to New York and book something. You're going to be booking out 5 years, Mark. Right. So, personally, I think that maybe her views are very optimistic and hopeful that maybe, she can be with her family. What I think is it's beautiful that they're here planning a union together. I think that is very optimistic for our future. So,
my kid is planning her wedding, and it's about 15 months out.
Yeah. And I knew that because actually I was talking to
a year to give birth to a wedding. It takes 9 months to give birth to a child.
No, it does take a while. And like I said, I'm still in my 60s in that never married space. I think Adam's in that never married space as well. I know you're
if I could say
him and all along those lines. But hold on, before you say something, I was just going to say really quickly that I do know that it is very interesting and all along those lines, because another conversation I had was with my photographer friend. He's the photographer for the Road to the Apollo and all along those lines. And he was saying that he is getting ready for his wedding, because not his wedding, but his son's wedding, because that'll be in August. So literally it's around the corner. And he's starting getting that panic mode because it's literally around the corner. Adam?
Go ahead, Adam.
Oh, yeah. Well, I'll just say a few things. You guys are giving this Romanian couple absolutely terrible advice. The correct advice is, number one, don't get married, because you're likely going to
You're freezing
get
a lot.
divorced and be miserable. Number two, if you're addressed to the companies that.
So I disagree. That my advice is, if you get married, stay married.
Again, I'm not sure if you all can hear me because you keep freezing. The likelihood of getting divorced is quite high. Number two, if you're going to get married, elope so you don't have to go through the misery and the stress of planning a wedding. And number three, for the love of God, don't have a kid, because if you have a kid, all that means is you're going to lose all your money. You're going to be dealing with vomit and other excrement for the rest of your life. You're going to be dealing with a kid screaming and crying all the time, and your job's going to suffer. And you're going to have to do that for many, many years.
Adam,
Don't
I hope that you go home to your mother and thank her
stupid.
for putting up with you when you were
Live your
a
life.
baby.
Forget the kids. Forget marriage.
So if you want, you've got 18, 20 years of the pain of the nuisance of having a kid, but then you have somebody to help,
Currently,
help care
we're
for
frozen
you
again.
Yeah,
you have somebody to help care for you in your old age. And we're going to live longer, or at least people your age, Adam, are going to live, to 100 and more. And if you don't want to have to rely exclusively on helper robots, then you maybe want to have a kid.
And just really quickly,
I want to point out something that Adam did say. Where did Adam go?
I pulled them out because
Anyway, I'm going to point out something that what Adam said that is very dead on, and I've pointed this out in court a couple of times when I have been drug in to be a witness for a wedding at the last minute. For some reason, I look like that perfect witness when I'm sitting around in court, and I'm usually there for domestic violence situations and things like that. So somebody picked me up one day and asked me to come witness a wedding. And I went in and waited appropriately. And then when the justice of the peace came forward and the magistrate said, all right, I'm here to get everyone married. Do you have your $25 with you to get married? They all raised their hand. And when they paid, he said, now, are there any questions before we get started? And I raised my hand and I go, yeah, you mean to tell me that it's only $25 to get married in this courtroom, but it's $25,000 to get divorced in that courtroom? He kind of looked at me like this and looked at them like, is this really your witness? And he goes, yeah, exactly. That's it. And I go, boy, you guys have got a racket here. So just take your vows serious. Make sure you're marrying someone that you're going to stick it out with, and they're going to stick it out with you. But my mom gave me good advice. Before you marry someone, take a road trip with them across country with very little money in your pocket. And if you can stand each other through all the trials and tribulations of that, you're probably going to be able to manage through life with them. So,
well, one thing I would say,
months lead in that year it takes to get, before the marriage, do at least half a dozen couples counseling sessions. And,
well, let me tell you something. If you've ever watched any of the stupid rom-com movies, a lot of them are, dead on when it comes to planning weddings. And you're going to go into a lot of heated situations. And if you're hitting those points where you're just not agreeing, but you're just doing the wedding just to get through the wedding and meet a commitment, don't. Seriously take a look at what you're doing. And seriously, take a look at why you were doing it. Honestly, you don't need a big wedding to prove that you can be with each other for the rest of your life. I mean, just go get married. Like Adam said, the justice of the peace is only $25. Then celebrate 10 years later with a, $100,000 party that you did it. That's, I think, is better spent money. Take your money.
That's better spending money.
Well, one thing I want to.
Go ahead, Adam.
Well, one thing I want the audience to know, because my screen has been freezing. If you heard me before, let me give you the good advice. For the love of God, don't get married. Married people never have sex. They fight all the time. They essentially become roommates who resent each other. And that's why 50 to 60% of marriages end in divorce. But if you're crazy enough to get married, you better elope so you don't waste the time preparing for a marriage ceremony that's going to take you months, cause you crazy stress, and cost you a lot of money. And if you decide to have a kid, well, then you have no one to blame but yourself, because all you're going to be doing is changing diapers, getting vomited upon, never sleeping, dealing with this thing screaming all the time. And God forbid when it grows up, it has a mental illness or a drug addiction, then you're really screwed, not to mention the cost of education. Live your life as an individual, find a companion, find a best friend, pursue your passions, forget about marriage and kids. I mean, come on, guys. Let's give the audience real advice. Let's not take them down the river where there's no place to come back from. It's called.
Adam, I've got a question to ask you about that. Hold a second, Rick. But we got Jacoby here. Jacoby has been dealing with,
and Jacoby's a perfect example of it.
I want to know what Jacoby thinks about all of this, because Jacoby, this whole conversation started because I ran into a couple yesterday when I went to a restaurant that is getting prepared to get engaged, and they are they're engaged and they're preparing to get married in Romania. And I was saying that I admired the couple and that they were a wonderful couple when I met them, because they had their pictures taken at Duke Gardens. So that's how this whole conversation started. But I was also hearing from Adam that it's bad advice. You know, you might have a kid that has disabilities, you have a kid with disabilities, and you might have to deal with all this vomit and everything. And apparently that's something you did. I never had a kid, but I do have my brother that had kids and everything. But what's your take about the horrible nature of being married and the horrible nature of young ones?
All that Adam said was it sounded like from a hateful guy who hates being around people and only wants to be by himself. Sound like a grumpy old man that lives next door. No,
I love being alone. It's a wonderful thing. You should try it sometimes. You might change into a conservative.
No, because conservatives seem to interrupt all the time, just like you did. But just to point out, you've got to find your own peace, and people find their peace even if it's with somebody. That's okay. Being in a relationship is just fine. Have that communication line open, and then figure out the trust between you two. Having a child is great, but it's all in what you can handle as an individual and as a partner. As long as you treat it as a partnership, everything works out fine. And yes, there's a lot of marriages that end in divorce and so on and so forth. There are other complications that come up in marriages, but it's just a matter of communication and working towards it. It's something that you work through. You just don't, hey, this isn't the right color, so I'm just going to divorce you because you gave me the wrong color shoes. That's what your advice sounded like, Adam. It's just
let me give you one example. I'll give you one example to the audience. Imagine working a 12 or a 14-hour day. You come home exhausted. You have your partner screaming at you. The house is a mess. The kid pooped his diaper. The kid's vomiting everywhere. And then you have an older kid who suffers from depression or bipolar disorder. And you have a daughter who just got into high school and is experimenting with sex with some useless piece of shit jock. That is marriage.
I feel like you've been watching
kids. It will make you miserable. Live your life. You only have a short amount of time on this.
I feel like you were watching Roseanne or the Connor.
I love how you guys judge my viewpoints. Like I'm wrong and you're right.
My wife and I have been together for. My wife and I have been together. My wife and I have been together for 38 years, married for 33 years.
Congratulations.
Thanks. So we've been lucky, but also you want to marry somebody with low self-esteem. You've somebody like my wife and I both have not the greatest self-esteem, so we are, somebody with high self-esteem, like half of my family are high self-esteemers who think they're super hot. And they're like, oh, like Trump, like in the trial, it came out, according to Michael Cohen, Michael Cohen asked Trump, well, what if Melania finds out about this thing with Stormy Daniels? And Trump's like, if she leaves, it's okay. I'm a hot commodity. I'll be able to get wife number 4 within a few weeks. So Trump's a high self-esteem guy. Those guys are hard to work with in a relationship. Somebody with low self-esteem will apologize, will work on the relationship. My wife and I have been in couples counseling for more than 30 years because we have great insurance that covers it. And because, we want to keep the relationship we have, because,
Yeah, hold on a second, Rick. I want to come to something that Adam has said in past shows that kind of ties into this whole conversation. Because one of the things that you have said, Adam, before, and it kind of comes in even to the notion, and maybe Jacoby will jump back in around values and all along those lines. Because one of the things that the Republican Party and conservatives in general push is this notion of family values, and that the two-family or the lack of a two-family household is what is hurting society and all in that space. You've even talked about some of the figures in the African American community and other communities as well. So I just wanted your take, Adam, on this notion, because on one hand you're saying that getting married is a bad thing, but on other times I've heard you say that this values that is a very much a part of the political landscape is what we need to have more of. So I'm a little confused here, Adam, because you're like speaking out, if I can use the Indian term, you're like speaking out of both sides of your mouth and everything. So I'm trying to figure out exactly where we're going with this.
Okay, I'll tell you where we're going with this. The key to a stable society is two-parent families. If you make the decision to get married, then you better commit to being a faithful, loving partner with that person for better or worse throughout the rest of your life. And if you have a child, you better raise that child with wonderful values, discipline, ethics, teaching them to work hard, persevere, overcome adversity, respect other people, respect authority and their country. So if you're going to be a parent, you have an obligation morally to be a good one. And if you're going to be a husband or wife or a partner, you have that same obligation to be a loving partner. But my point is that I do not believe that marriage is a good idea for many, if not most people. And I think kids is even worse. Married or sex, presenting narcissistic kids that you see on college campuses these days because they have no values whatsoever. So my advice is this: be a creator, be an entrepreneur, live your best life, because there's going to come a day when you don't have that life anymore. Don't get married. Don't have children. Be your best self and live authentically.
Right. So I've heard a term called lesbian bed death, which is the idea that when lesbians couple up, that after a while, the sex does kind of go away. And that's probably true for a lot of couples. So my tip is, do not blow up your marriage because getting with somebody younger might get you better sex, because so what'll happen is you'll destroy your existing family. You'll get a trophy wife, or, if you're a cougar, a trophy husband. And after another 18 months with them, you'll find out what's terrible about them. You'll quit having sex with them. So you'll be in the same boat as you were, except with half the money and with everybody around you wounded.
Rick, I
would
agree with you a little bit on that.
Agree with that, Rick. I would also say
a lot of
that
people put unrealistic expectations.
Go ahead.
Go ahead, Adam.
Adam froze again. And everything.
All right. So with Adam frozen, I'm going to say that in the 70s, I grew up at a time when really only the hot people, especially in high school, could hook up with each other. The jocks and the cheerleaders. That was that time. And now when you just go to Costco or to the mall or whatever, you see couples of all shapes and sizes. And since 72% of Americans are overweight or obese, a lot of those sizes are extra large. And I'm like, what the heck? These people could not have hooked up with each other when I was trying to hook up as a teenager. But now there's less pressure on how you look. And I would argue that it's probably because everybody has what's called a spank bank. Our society is so pornographied that which is bad in some ways, but it's also freeing, that you can go ahead and you can be schlubby, your partner can be schlubby, and it doesn't matter. You can still get with each other because each of your heads is filled with dirty pictures that you can use. So
just really quickly,
which also means you can stay in a marriage where it's 40 years now, and neither of you is as hot as when you began, but you can still, get with each other because of your spank banks.
No,
Well,
but
first I would say,
just really quickly and everything, just along those same lines and in that space, because I had another part of it in another interesting conversation, which actually was earlier today. And Adam, you'll be interested in what was said, and I definitely want to hear Kim's response to this as well. And Jatovia and Rick, if you want to jump in also. But I was talking to my boss at the cultural center that I work at, and she is actually her father was actually the first African American mayor of Chapel Hill and all along those lines. But she is of the opinion that a lot of the people that are protesting, and they just noticed I said that her father is I think he's a Democrat if I remember correctly, but he is definitely, and I would say the family in general is liberal, but they are of the feeling that a lot of these protesters are protesting over something that they may not have a total understanding of, that they're protesting because it's the cool thing to do and all along those lines. But I just wanted your take on that. If some of these protesters are protesting because it's the hip thing to do and not because they have an understanding of the issues, whether it's this issue or climate change or a number of other issues. I think that there are a number of students personally that actually are aware of the issues, but she may have a point that some of these people are
protesting out of ignorance. They're also protesting because they have liberal professors.
If I were in college, I would drop by the protests, one, out of curiosity to see if it's a bunch of jerks, two, if they had good points, and three, and maybe the main point is to see if there were any hot protester women. I mean, everything I did in college was to see if I could
Adam, what's your comment to that? He's typing it.
Well, first, with regard to the protesters, they're ignorant, entitled, narcissistic kids whose universities have failed them, whose families have failed them, and who have no values whatsoever and know nothing of what they're talking about. They're a disgrace to this country and a disgrace to our future. Now, as far as marriage goes, the last thing I'll say is this. Like I said before, imagine working a 14-hour day, coming home not only to a partner screaming at you, a dirty house, a kid who's pooping and vomiting and screaming. Imagine the partner then demands sex after that. That's the definition of misery. The best thing, honestly, is to have no sex drive whatsoever and to be with someone who's a companion. You don't want to come home every night thinking, oh, is my partner going to ask me for sex? You have to focus on you, your development, your passion, your authenticity, and living your best life, and not conforming to the institutions or expectations of society.
I think you shouldn't conform to expectations.
So many men do that. So many women do that. And they're
just really quick.
Well, I don't think you should. And maybe that's the difference. You're focused on doing what you think you should do instead of what you want to do.
So I have another argument.
There are a lot of unrealistic expectations put into a marriage. And I know people who live together for many years and then they get married and all of a sudden they blow up. I was with the same person for over 42 years. I never left him, but I'm not going to sit here and say it was all perfect. I'm not going to tell you that it didn't take work. What I learned is it took as much work as I put into my 14-hour day at work. And that's where we make the mistake. And Rick is dead on where he is going to a counseling of some kind to help keep that conversation alive and going and keep honesty back and forth between each other, because sometimes you do start shutting down, Adam. Sometimes you're just like, oh, God, I don't want to have sex with that guy. I'm so tired. I took care of all the kids. I worked 10 to 12 hours today. I just can't do it. And my husband would always tell me, men only want 3 things to make them happy: beer, sex, and food. That's it.
Hey, there's such a thing as lazy sex, where
I really don't care about the sex at all.
There are ways to have sex where neither party is working very hard at all, and sometimes that's the best sex.
But when we're talking about this, how do we correlate it to the political situations that are going on today? And I think we get down to the values in our society and the relationships, because relationships are very important. And are you willing to sustain whatever it takes to keep that relationship going? And I think, Trump has proven he doesn't give a hoot about his relationship with any of the people he's personally with, I have to question, would he even give a hoot about the relationship that he builds with us or for us and from our country, because that's who he represents us. So, I mean, I really have to question, are his values what our society needs? And I agree with Rick. You know, sometimes people think, oh, I'll just go with the younger person rather than thinking out the consequences and what your commitments were to with the person that you're with now. So, I mean, people see things looking far greener on the other side of the fence than what it really is. And
Well,
I think
I have
with
2
what-
points. The one point is that there's more tolerance for opening up relationships where one party has a higher libido than the other party. You know, you have things like thruples. Not everybody's going to do a thruple, especially if the couple is in their 70s. That would be too weird.
I just learned that term this week. I literally just learned that, thruple. I had no idea what that was.
What throuple is like a swinger? It's like 3 couples together. I'm confused.
Yeah,
It's like a
couple.
relationship where there are 3 people.
It's a couple
Yeah,
of 3,
well,
not 2.
The audience needs to know, Mark. The audience needs to know that the advice they're getting is bad advice. Do not get married. You're going to be miserable. And if you have a kid, you're going to be stressed and miserable. That's why men die in their early 70s from high blood pressure, high cholesterol, heart attack.
Live a decade longer
Go
than
into
single men.
marriage thinking you're going to
I
be
don't care what
miserable.
the statistics say. Married people are miserable in both genders.
You'll be happy.
Here's another argument for
Yeah.
marriage.
Live
It's
your
a
best
great-
life. And I'm the one who speaks the truth here. I mean, Kim, let me ask you a question. You said you were married for a number of years. You know, instead of
I was with him for 42.
and married men are such wimps. They are such wimps. Oh my God. They don't do anything with their lives. And Kim, you said you were married. Why didn't you just tell your husband before you got married, listen, buddy, I want to be alone for 4 or 5 days a week. We'll hang out on the weekends. But in the rest of the time, I'm living for myself. Then you have the independence and the freedom. You have to have your cake and eat it too. And you don't have to deal with a kid who's screaming and crying and a husband who demands sex when you don't want it.
Well, I never had that issue, Adam. So I think it's because I learned to.
Well, you
just
never know because you
understand-
didn't try it the other way.
So marriage is
I
also
just
great.
loved him
Marriage.
too much.
Here's one more argument in favor of
I know
marriage.
the audience is going to call me shallow and superficial, but what I'm telling you guys is good advice. Trust me, especially you young people.
Marriage is a great vehicle for wealth creation. When my wife and I got married, we had
Politician.
a net worth of 0. But the society is kind of set up to help people who are in couples and making kids. And, you know, I mean, at the very least, when you want to mooch off your relatives, they're much more willing to kick in if they're helping you and your marriage than just you in your basement.
Good point
Well,
that you brought up,
society
Kim.
expects you to be married if you are a politician. It's just a proven fact that politicians generally do better. I would like to see that debunked because I think a single person can do just as good. I really don't think you have to be married to show that you are a good person and politician. But you know, nobody wants to grow old lonely.
And married
But,
men are such emasculated wimps. Look at these men when they're married. They're emasculated by their partner.
Yeah, but who
They have no
cares?
lives.
Who cares?
No
Why do you
passion,
need to be? Why do you
independence,
why do
no
you-
career, no ambition. What a disgrace. Don't get married, audience.
What do you
Don't
get
have
out
kids
Why
of
do
to
we
be
being
have
here.
what do you get out of being not
What a bunch of wimps.
emasculated?
Can
I
I
freely
ask-
admit. Hold on. I admit I'm emasculated, but what does it cost me besides a little self-esteem, which I didn't have much of in the first
I'm
place?
sorry.
And you're
But
with someone
why
you
do I
love.
need
So
why
let
do I
me
need truck nuts?
Get-
Why
get-
do I need a barbed wire bicep tattoo? Why can't I be emasculated? I'm okay with that.
In nature, there are
Because when you're
animals-
emasculated, you're not liberated. You
Well,
want to be free. You want your spirit to be free for adventure, for journeys, for unpredictable things in life. Marriage
animals
Jim
have proven you don't have to be married to be
emasculates you
together for
and
life.
makes you into a cog in a wheel of conformity. Young people, don't do it. Don't have kids. Find Andre Agassi.
But I want to say that nature has proven to us that you don't have to get married to have a lifetime partnership. Look at penguins, ducks, I think even cats, lions. I mean, so many of them, they choose a lifetime partner and there is no official marriage. Okay. So I don't think when you find your lifetime partner, you have to get married. That's just some social nonsense that we put upon each other. And we also put upon us that for wealth, in other words, you get bigger tax deductions and stuff like that, which I think that just needs to be done away with. But I truly believe that there, you can find the right partner. You don't have to marry him. Look at Goldie Hawn. I mean, she didn't marry.
Or even Susan, speaking of Durham, even Susan Sarandon and Tim Robbins, I think they were together ever since the.
And find someone with a low sex.
They were together, but they were never married.
Make sure they have a low sex drive, because if they don't, you're going to be stuck laying in bed at midnight with someone who's trying to touch you when you don't want to. You better have a lot of headaches at that point.
That's how he doesn't cheat on you. Like
marry
Trump
somebody
did.
with a low sex drive if you're going to get married. Otherwise, you'll be
But
miserable.
hold on a second.
You'll need two gallons of aspirin just to get out of it every night.
Hold on a second, because I did have a question for Kim based on something she said earlier, and I don't know if the other folks, and maybe Jacoby will jump back in and everything along these lines. But you mentioned the fact that the politicians, and I would argue that that's more the federal politicians, because there are a number of single politicians. I know a number of them on the local level, as well as some that are even divorced on the local level, and all in that space, and maybe even the state level, and all along those lines. But definitely on the federal level, you almost have to be mandatory to be married. Because I can't even think of a single person in our Congress. I'm sure there are some, but I just can't think of who they are.
I don't know why, because
Lindsey Graham, Senator Lindsey Graham, a lifelong bachelor, he gets a lot of flack for it. People make assumptions and they tell stories which may or may not be true. Byron Donalds is a Republican congressman who I think has aspirations of being Trump's VP, and yes, people have questions about him because he's single. So yeah, it makes it a little tougher if you're.
And the same thing with Tim Scott, and then Tim Scott got engaged.
Is that Tim Scott? Am I confusing? I think I'm confusing Tim Scott and Byron Donalds.
Because Tim just got engaged.
There's a perception.
Go out
right?
there and
Just
be your best self. Don't get married. Don't have kids.
You.
Just go out there, be your best self, and be pretty. I'm pretty.
So
there you go. Go run for office, Adam.
There's a thing called sociobiology, which looks at behavior from the framework of what evolution kind of pushes us to do. And the deal of marriage evolutionarily is when a man and a woman couple up, the woman gets the protection and support of the man gets the guarantee that her kids will be his.
But speaking of protection, hold on a second. Speaking of protection, there was a notion that just happened in the political line, because I was reading earlier today, because right now we're dealing with Michael Cohen, but Stormy Daniels testified, and apparently because of the folks that are very much enthusiastic supporters of Trump, she was wearing a bulletproof vest. I just learned that because apparently her lawyer let that out, that she was wearing a bulletproof vest while she was testifying. So I was just wondering our thoughts around this notion that she was.
I thought she just had big breasts.
Well, no, apparently she was wearing a bulletproof vest.
Should have if she's felt the need to wear a vest, she should have wore a helmet too, because they weren't going to shoot for her chest. They were going to shoot for her head if they wanted to kill her.
What she should get is Kevlar.
I'll tell you, she's such a moral person.
I like her, but she should get Kevlar breast implants, bulletproof implants.
When I think of a moral, upstanding citizen, I think of Stephanie Clifford, otherwise known as Stormy Daniels. Hell, I'd even have Daniels.
Yeah, you think of that and everything. But Kim, just really quickly,
I feel like the only person
hold on a second, because I didn't hear Kim's answer, because I did mention that one of my other bosses, because I know you're one of my bosses, in the sense of because I work for so many different companies, that they are of the notion that some of these protesters are not trying to even understand the nuances of the issues. Now, I personally think that some of them are trying to understand the nuances, but I just wondering your take, because you do spend a lot of time because of your various jobs and the fact that you're connected with state and everything among the young people. So are you feeling that the young people are actually studying these issues, or are they having like a visceral reaction, like a gut reaction and everything? So what is your take on these protests? Are they actually studying the issues, or do you think that they are just kind of going for it because it's a cool thing to do?
I think for many, many years, we've established freedom of speech, and protests were a good way to allow people to express their concerns, the way they feel, without being violent and getting their point across loud and in a mass group. And I think by restricting them from doing this, you're stripping them of the very right and reasons why they went to school, and that was for experiences, learning, and lessons. I know a lot of young people who are protesting the war. They just want the wars to end. They don't believe that we need to be continuously allowing people to exercise their muscles this way. You know, Putin needs to put his guns down, Israel needs to put their guns down, and we just need to talk it out. And I think that's very mature on their part. Now, are the protests getting out of hand? Yes, because you have a lot of angst and anxiety building up. You might have families that are being involved. Let's talk about, somebody said today that there was one doctor that was locked into Gaza since this last bombing. It's actually 20 medical professionals who went over there from America to help give medical aid are over there. Maybe more, but it was a mission of 20 is what it was. And they're all locked over there like hostages now because Israel didn't put their arms down. But here's the thing. I think the protests need to happen. I think people need to be able to voice their opinions, but I think we need to go in and sit down and talk to them. I think we need to listen, and we need to sit down and have open conversation, just like we do in counseling, right, Rick?
Yes, but I mean, I think the reason people don't protest Putin very much in America is there's zero expectation that we have any leverage over Putin. The protests of Israel is because we were Israel's maybe greatest ally, and there's the idea that if we can budge our people, our universities, our president, that maybe he can budge Netanyahu, though that's unlikely because Netanyahu likes Trump more. Well, he likes keeping his job, and he keeps his job as long as the war goes on. And also he likes Trump better than he likes Biden.
But Rick, we just had, at least here in North Carolina, and I don't know if Jacoby's got some thoughts because I see he's joined us again and everything, but we just had the opposite because some of the things we talked about on World Politics and World Edition, I know that I think Adam isn't the biggest fan of it, is DEI, which is diversity and inclusion, and I forgot what the other word stands for and everything, equity, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And they just abandoned the DEI at UNC because they want to take that money and put it into public safety, like the police force at UNC. And I think that was announced yesterday and all along those lines. But I was just wondering our take on this notion, because one of the things that they were also trying to do was get us to defund some of the investments that were going to Israel. But in this case, the UNC board of directors opted to do something different. They got rid of DEI, and now they're putting it into the college law enforcement.
Just to point out the reason, Rick, you're right. Nobody's going to protest Putin here. Why? Because we're already going against them. So what are you going to protest for? It doesn't make any sense. If you're going to protest, you're protesting against what somebody's doing. So if we're actually doing what people would protest for, there's really no reason to protest. That's just making noise for no reason. And the reason they protest what's going on in Israel is exactly what you said. They're protesting against us sending all those arms and everything else. They're wanting to end the death, but Israel's not doing that. So they want people to make a bigger stand. The irony in what you just said, Mark, though, is so rich, and you have to think about it, and it's not too deep. DEI is about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Right. It's supposed to focus mainly on the minority community and so on and so forth, be it, Hispanic to Asian, Black, and everything. But the main focus that we talk about DEI, when we talk about it, we talk about the Black community being included in there. But think about how rich it is, what you just said. They're taking money from DEI, which once you hear it, you think about Black people. And where are they putting it? In law enforcement. Think about that irony.
Yeah.
That is just wild to think about. But the thing with DEI, which a lot of people don't really realize, is that DEI, yes, it's supposed to focus on the minority communities and bring about diversity, equity, and inclusion across the board. But similar to what's going on or what happened with affirmative action, both actually gave more jobs to those white individuals and not those in the minority community. Ironically, but it's the same complaint that people have about, welfare. Oh, welfare. You got to realize when you hear welfare queens, people are talking about black people or black women, but the most people on welfare are white people. So right now, DEI helps more white people than black people. But because you hear it and it's being demonized so much and it hasn't been manipulated, it hasn't been worked to a point to where it's supposed to help the community and actually balance the scales the way it's supposed to, people still hear it and don't really realize that what it's supposed to do, and we can fix it. Because
Jacoby, just really quickly about fixing things, because there's another issue going on, and I'm probably gonna get myself in trouble, including with some of my brothers and sisters out there that is in our community, and I don't know the answer. I'm wondering if Jacoby and maybe others got some theories. But another issue that is impacting us greatly, particularly in the African American community, is black on black crime, and all along those lines. But it's also very evident in other societies as well. So, anybody got any theories as to how we can stop that and all along those lines? Because it is a issue.
So before we even get to that, we got to address the fact that black on black crime, or saying black on black crime, is mainly a societal thing that focuses, again, just as we're talking about, welfare queens. We never really talk about how the fact that there's more white on white crime than there is black on black crime. There's still the same amount of Hispanic on Hispanic crime than there is black on black crime, which I think it was Michael
Eric Dyson.
Yes, who always talks about, and actually what would be good, and I completely agree with what he said, is that you talk about neighborhood crime, because truthfully, it's the neighborhood that you live in. Those individuals within that neighborhood are the most likely to be that accomplice. Same thing with the most likely accomplice in domestic abuse. When the husband says, "Oh, well, I was beaten," it's somebody or the woman says, "Well, I was hit," it's probably the husband. So it's the same thing. It's neighborhood crime. So the best way to address neighborhood crime is to look at the societal pressures that put on these particular neighborhoods, be it in the African American community, be it in the Hispanic community, or in the white community in different areas. So that's where our address should be, because each has a different issue, yes, but it's still just neighborhood crime and not dedicated, hey, black on black crime is a problem. Well, white on white crime is a problem too.
Yeah,
so, Jacoby, this morning you touched on sexual assault, and you correctly said it's more a crime of power than it is of wanting to have sex. It's dominance. And so I looked up statistics, and violent sexual assault, along with every other type of crime, went down by 50% between the Bush into Clinton administration and now. Crimes, all big time crimes, murder, assault, they're all down by 50%. And I'd argue that one thing is that knocked it down is that we live online now. We live inside, and with everybody off the streets and at home just clicking away, there's less opportunity for crime.
Those are lazy.
Yeah, but Rick, along those same lines, because the other thing that I mentioned earlier, and it did happen here in Durham, I know we're an international platform, but this happens all over the world, is a lot of the crime, and something that even Kim talks about, there is a lot of crime that is domestic oriented, and it's not just the wives and even the kids, but it's also a lot of relationship crime. Because as I said, I heard, and this is secondhand knowledge, so I wasn't there and I didn't talk to the perpetrators of the crime and everything, but I did hear that it was over a relationship, and it was boyfriend, girlfriend kind of stuff, and there were bullets flying because of that. And I think that even the incident that happened in the apartment complex might have been relationship oriented as well. I think a lot of crime is relationship based. So I just wanted your take on that, because it seems like a lot of our crime is now being thrust out there because of what's going on in bad relationships.
But also, Toby was talking about the neighborhood. If our neighborhoods have moved from being outside, walking around, talking to people, to online, then a lot of crime is going to happen online. and will not be violent because somebody's taking your money via an online scam. But your neighborhood includes the people in your house with you, so domestic stuff won't necessarily go down as much as street crime, because when you're off the street, you're at home with somebody.
No, but Kim, what's those figures you gave? Because I know one of the things you talk about quite often is the nature of domestic crimes and how it is very big. And I know that you brought up some things in that space in past times. So I know that that's something that you are very passionate about, Kim. So I just wanted your take on the domestic crimes that are going on out there.
12 million female victims a year, approximately 24 million children. You cut the 12 million in half for males. It is a crime where we exceed over $86 million a year just cleaning it up. Actually, wrong, 8.6 billion. So you need to take a look at these numbers and say what's going on. It is the most dangerous crime an officer is dispatched for. So they have recreated some laws, and officers cannot go out alone to a domestic crime call. The papers that are issued, protective orders, people think that protects them. It is just a fake piece of paper. And nowadays, when a girl calls and says, okay, I'm being attacked, please come help me. And she, please, oh my God, he's strangling me. They go, do you have that piece of paper? Can you read us the case number on it? Da, da, da. Okay. No. So my advice to women is, help, I'm having a heart attack. And just let them come, and they will send ambulances, fire trucks, policemen. There'll be, 8 men to every whatever comes. You don't have to worry about 2 men coming, hunting you down, and potentially finding your dead body. Now, the recidivism of this crime is horrendous. Over 70%. And I was corrected on these numbers, but I was told it was over 80. But over 70% of the men that are released from jail after being arrested for an incident will recommit that crime within the next 48 hours of being released. And, a good 90% of the time is going to be worse than the original crime they committed. So there is nothing happening to prevent these crimes. There's a lot that can be done, AI, tracking devices, and things like that, but nobody wants to invest in the money to protect women's lives like this. And, I say women because they are the highest rated victimization. We sit here and cry about a certain amount of deaths here and there. They're over, God, the last time they even allowed statistic data collected for this was 2017. So, back then it was 10,000. I was told that it increased tremendously in the past few years. So, what do you say or do about anything about this?
So I just looked at a bunch of tables of domestic violence by year, and hard to say, because like you said, I don't know what's stopping the data gathering, but there's very little recent data. But it looks like it's dropped since the 90s. It looks like 1992 was like the peak of all kinds of crime, but it hasn't dropped as much as other types of crime. I don't know why 1992 was so crimey, but it's every type of crime except for 2020. People went a little crazy in 2020 under COVID, and crime popped back up, but it's back down.
Yeah, and so the crazy part about it is perception is reality, and crime is going down. But people are told that it's going up, and people believe that and keep everybody on edge. The reality, another reality, which Kim touched on about the treatment of women in our society, that's due to us still being a patriarchy, and we still see men as this dominant force, and we're supposed to be this. Women are supposed to submit, and blah, 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 rather than a co-partnership or an equal playing field. And so you have all this netting that's, it's a big ball of hatred, when we should be focused on empathy and working together and doing all these things to fix our society. But we don't. We get to Kim, you pointed out, a woman should yell out that she should be having a heart attack rather than she should be strangled. Well, that's a sad reflection on what we live in, and because it's a reality that. And then
play back
you can even take
dispatcher
it even
calls.
further. You can even take it even further. If it were a minority woman, they're going to have to yell out, "I'm a white woman being strangled."
No,
So you can go and
having a
that-
heart attack.
Yeah.
Don't say you're being
Oh,
strangled.
yeah.
Having a
But
heart attack.
it's just the sad realities of our society that we just get in
It
this.
is.
We never were, and this is again when I said it 2024, the beginning when we talked about New Year's resolutions. This is just the honest reality of where we are. We're legitimately in a presidential election year where people are so okay with a man raping a woman, they're still going to vote for him. If you notice that the biggest, the fact that, and think of it this way, the fact that we are having wall-to-wall coverage of him doing hush money payments and fudging the numbers, wall-to-wall payments of all this stuff. And there were no wall-to-wall payment or wall-to-wall coverage of the rape trial.
You
That
know
happens first.
what else? Nobody's
We don't even
ever
talk about that
questioned.
as being one trial.
Nobody's even questioned how many other things did he commit fraud on his business books. Nobody's even asked that question.
One crazy thing is that Trump was worried about the Stormy Daniels thing coming out in 2016 because he thought that was enough to scuttle his campaign. But now it's like his people have been so conditioned to follow him that there's no. I mean, they barely deny that he got with her, and a lot of his people are proud that he got with her.
Oh yeah, I mean, she was a whore, so what does it matter?
And that's the worst thing that can happen in any case. That's what happens in a lot of rape cases. It's the blame of the victim. But speaking of blaming the victim, and I was fortunately not part of this culture. I think you might have been, and I'm not shading you in this way when I bring this up and everything, Rick, and all along those lines. But Whoopi Goldberg is coming out because she's got a memoir, and she's also talking about. I think she was going to move to Warsaw, to Canada. And now she's saying that nobody, because I think Trump said nobody wants her, and she's like, "Don't worry, I'm not going anywhere because I'm not wanting, because I'm going to continue to fight against you." But I do know that one thing she talks about in terms of the '80s, meaning Whoopi, is this notion that drugs were so readily available in the '80s entertainment community, because apparently one of the things she says is that she was found in a hotel by the maid and she had the whole white powder on her, all along those lines, but it was like almost the norm in the '80s and all in that space. But you were coming up in that time and everything. So Rick, was it that easily available? Because like I said, it was never anything that
so
tempted me.
I didn't get much writing work in the '80s, but in the 21st century, it had shifted from cocaine to fiber gummies. That my whole office, we were all kind of addicted to fiber gummies, because when you sit at a desk all day, you get constipated. So yeah, no cocaine, just wanting to poop.
Well, like I said, Whoopi said that she was a high functioning cocaine 80 in the 1980s, while some on the set of some of the major films that made her famous. So she said she'd regularly come up on the set on time, do the job, and keep pace with production, while also admitting that she was very high on.
Yeah. I know somebody who was kind of working at SNL during that period, and I feel like part of the reason that he was able to get by with not being the best at his job was that he was maybe a good drug connection.
That's quite possible. Like I said, it was
But
quite.
I don't know. I don't have any direct experience. I mean, the first bar I ever worked at was pretty much a cocaine bar. I saw huge amounts of cocaine there. Very annoying. Have you ever been around a bunch of people who are on coke?
Oh yeah, it drives me crazy.
It's bad. They talk for hours and they tell the same story over and over. They don't go to sleep. It's
and they think they're smarter than everybody else. I don't know where that comes from, but they just have this think that they are high and above everyone else. Well, they're high, but I mean, that they're above everyone else, and that their level of intelligent knowledge of what they have contained in their brain at that time is far greater and superior. So yeah, and
I got one other
another
question.
man who owned a bar in North Carolina, and he ended up having to close it down because the amount of cocaine that was coming in. He was just like, the police were always hounding him and blaming him for it not going after the people bringing it in. They were accusing him. So, he finally just said it just wasn't worth it. He had a fun, nice, cute little bar, and people kept bringing in the drugs. And he even had signs, you can't go in and do coke in the bathroom, and I mean, it's just sad. But
It is very sad. But I do have one other quick question. This is because one of the other articles I read was about a prominent Jewish individual, but I'm very confused because I think he used to be liberal, but he's had some very high-profile cases, including O.J. Simpson and Jeffrey Epstein.
You're talking
and a number of other
Dershowitz?
folks. So Alan Dershowitz, is he a liberal? Is he a conservative?
No,
is he a
no,
libertarian?
no,
Or is he
he's-
just an opportunist? What's up with
If
Alan
he
Dershowitz?
ever was a liberal, he quit being a liberal, and he's fully in the conservative Trumpy camp.
Okay, so he's fully in the Trumpy camp, even though he sometimes tries to paint himself as being a libertarian and trying to be this. But I've also read some things even on Twitter, and some of the other sources might have been Reddit that saying that he's very much about the bottom dollar, and that he's also part of that older age crowd that we were talking about, which is the 80s crowd and all in that space, because I think he's up in his 80s.
Well, he was
as
part
well.
of the what's his face Epstein
Yes.
deal, where he admits to getting massages from the girls on Epstein Island, but his defense is he kept his underpants on. So, and he's very hurt that he doesn't get invited to the best parties on Martha's Vineyard anymore since he got implicated in the Epstein stuff. So he's kind of a resentful guy, and he's fully Trumpy.
So Dershowitz is for now fully Trumpy and everything along those lines. So that's the way it go. Because I was trying to figure out, because I knew there was a time, including when he defended OJ, that he was seen as being liberal. So it sounds like he's gone to the opposite side in the opposite array. In
It's which side gives you the love. Bill Maher, he thinks he's a liberal. He's probably been more liberal at certain points in his life, but when he says certain stuff, he gets like more positive feedback from people. And now he's a fake liberal for people who have used to be liberals and now want excuses to justify some of their suckier conservative stances. They can say, Bill Maher agrees with me.
Yeah, Bill Maher, he has really gone off the deep end, especially when you talk about Muslims and everything else. For some odd reason, he goes down a deep, dark path, and he parrots everything from the right wing, especially when he talks about the Muslim community.
Yeah, and like Jonathan Turley is this constitutional scholar, lawyer, and he's totally gone, now, but he gets all the love from Fox. I was just watching him on Fox this afternoon, and he was saying a bunch of stuff that just seemed like garbage to me, but I don't know, because I'm not a lawyer, but like you can see people drifting in whatever direction gets them the love.
And I think that is the way things are going right now. Anyway, it's really kind of sad, the state of affairs that we're in. And we also need to just start paying attention to some of the other trials that are going on. We need to start paying more attention to the other problems, because I think that some of these things are a smokescreen that are trying to cover up some of the real things that are going on. Nick even brought this to our attention, where we don't even hear about the border anymore. All we hear about is Trump and Suggs, and now Menendez. And God knows what's going to come out in the Menendez trial. So, I mean, we've got a lot of things right now that are happening that I think that we need to kind of like say, okay, it's happening, but what else is going on? And we need to start questioning and making demands for answers. Like, I want to know more answers about why would you send 12 officers to arrest one man in Charlotte, and 8 of them get shot and 4 of them are dead? I want to know what the hell is that guy all about that you had to send 12.
You know,
12.
there was probably pre-existing information that could have prepared them to not get shot by that guy.
But
And-
why not clear out the neighborhood too? So,
Yeah, but, like,
In terms of the border, real quick though, also a reason why the border is not being talked about is because the problem that had popped up, which again, there are spikes that happen at the border repeatedly. There was a spike that was going on in 2019, and that's why Trump wanted to close down the border, and he got caught up in litigation and couldn't do that. But what's happened at the border earlier, the crossings have fallen by at least 40%. So because there's no problem going crazy like before, even though there's still a high amount of crossings, it's not the problem that they're complaining about anymore.
I think you nailed it on the head too. I think that Trump being tied up in court all the time, there's not somebody out there stirring up misinformation. He's too busy keeping himself out of jail instead of saying, stir. And I think he's the one who is stirring up the misinformation. He's got enough money to do that. He's got access to a lot of media. And I think he's the one who's been stirring up the misinformation about the border. And we unfortunately have to end this, and we'll continue on Thursday. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Make sure you stay healthy and wealthy. We'll see you soon. All right. Okay. All right. I guess it's up to me.
Yeah, your turn.
Okay, here we go.